In July 2022, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled on a case called RVJJ, which removed the rights of the accused to a fair trial by mandating reverse disclosure, so a false accuser would know the questions which a defense lawyer would ask them in advance, and they could prepare their story before going to court. Supreme Court Justice Russell Brown strongly disagreed. He was quite outspoken, and in his dissenting opinion, he wrote,
"In Canada, there has been an unprecedented and unconstitutional erosion by Parliament of the fair trial rights of the presumptively innocent. Parliament has legislated a formula for wrongful convictions. Indeed, it has all but guaranteed them."
The Liberal government did not like this statement from a Conservative Supreme Court Justice. 6 months later, in January 2023, after speaking at a black tie event in Arizona, Justice Brown was invited to join a group of ladies at his hotel bar. The same night, an allegation of drunken sexual misconduct was made against Justice Brown by a retired Marine named Jonathan Crump. Mr. Crump somehow knew Justice Russell Brown's name, his position as a Supreme Court Justice, and somehow, he knew to file a complaint with the Canadian Judicial Council. The women who invited Justice Brown to join them also referred to Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, on a first-name basis, when they exclaimed, "Justin will love this." Justice Russell Brown was removed from the Supreme Court of Canada. All it took was an allegation. If a member of the highest court, who speaks out for truth and justice, can be taken down with no evidence, what chance does the average person have against a false allegation? Here's how the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation reported the case. Be sure to watch until the end of the video to see what the CBC didn't report, and ask yourself if the calls for transparency apply to the government-funded media giant as well.
So talk to us a little bit about how this all happened.
Sure, yeah. So there were allegations made against Justice Brown relating to a conference in Arizona some months back. A retired Marine named Jonathan Crump made the complaint against him to the Canadian Judicial Council following an altercation that the two of them had at the resort that ended with Mr. Crump punching Justice Brown. He says in response to Justice Brown's conduct, the allegation is that he was drunk and making unwanted advances. And so that's essentially what the complaint included. Justice Brown denied those allegations. We still don't have his story. The sort of dribble of information that came out about it was not ideal, and I think itself was quite damaging to Justice Brown's reputation. You had sort of news coming out that he was on a leave, and then for a while it was unclear why he was on a leave. Then you had news stories that included some of Mr. Crump's allegations, and those are of course quite damaging to Justice Brown. We still have never heard Justice Brown's response. He denied the allegations, as we've seen. And so I think that folks need to have, the Canadian Judicial Council should have a look at how this is played out in the public sphere. Because, you know, it's easy to see how this could be seen to be quite unfair to Justice Brown, that you have these allegations aired without a response. And, you know, people will tend to assume those things are true, even if perhaps they're not.
Here's the salacious, one-sided report from Global News, which feeds unsubstantiated allegations to the public as facts, with no mention of the physical assault by ex-Marine Jonathan Crump on Justice Russell Brown.
A clearer picture is emerging of an alcohol-fueled night that cost a Canadian Supreme Court justice his job. Global News has obtained new body cam footage of a confrontation from last winter involving former Judge Russell Brown. He resigned last June after a complaint to the Canadian Judicial Council, but details remain hidden from the public. Taria Isri reports on the push for more transparency here at home.
This guy's a Supreme Court justice.
He's literally Supreme Court justice of Canada.
You can't see the former Supreme Court judge in the video, but witnesses say you can hear him.
Hey, Justin's gonna love this. Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister.
Heard in new body cam video released to Global News by Arizona's Paradise Valley Police Department. A group of friends met the ex-judge from Alberta at a hotel bar last January. Brown was in town to speak at a legal gala. They allege the former justice was drunk and started harassing the women at the table, then tried following them up to their room.
Broke them at the table and everything.
Sorry that you had to put up with them.
Someone complained to the Canadian Judicial Council, and a few days later, Brown was placed on leave. Nothing was made public, just an asterisk on a case he was supposed to hear, confirming he did not participate. The news eventually came out, with U.S. authorities releasing body cam video.
What you have here is a stark contrast between the way matters are dealt with in the United States and the way that they're dealt with here when it comes to the judiciary. And as you've seen in the United States, there's tremendous transparency.
Brown has called the allegations contradictory and inaccurate, but resigned last month. Brown stepped down before the Canadian Judicial Council released a report into his conduct. It recommended a public inquiry, which now won't happen since he resigned. But the council is keeping its findings secret.
I find that extraordinary. A report that was intended to make a hearing public itself is being kept in private.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will now have to review applications for Brown's replacement.
Here is CTV's coverage, arguably the most impartial of all Canadian media networks.
So as I understand it then,
Justice Russell Brown's 8 years at the Supreme Court came to an end today when he announced he is resigning over what he calls false allegations. He's been on paid leave since February, citing a lengthy Canadian Judicial Council investigation that would have kept him away from the bench for many more months. He said in a statement, "While my counsel and I are confident that the complaint would have been ultimately dismissed, the continuing delay is in nobody's interests. The courts, the public's, my family's, or my own." His resignation puts an end to the investigation. The former justice was attending a black tie event in Arizona, an evening that ended at the bar of his hotel, where police were called in following an altercation. This is a recording of the 911 call this past January.
Hi, I'd like to report an assault at the Omni. A middle-aged guy in a tuxedo. I think we identified him as Russell Brown.
Police arrived at the Omni Hotel. The attending officer had a body cam. He spoke to guests who said Brown was invited by a few women to sit at their table. But then, according to witnesses in the police report, he was intoxicated and began touching and kissing them.
Wasn't it kind of like any of it, like unwanted?
Oh, definitely unwanted.
Not touching, like he physically.
Yeah. I felt like he was coming on to me even though he was touching her.
Brown denies all this, saying it was one of the male patrons who had been drinking who punched him.
You punched him, he didn't punch you. But he's going after the girls I'm with.
No charges were laid that evening, but the following day, the complaint went to the Judicial Council.
Brown's departure won't affect cases before the Supreme Court. But in a statement today, the Chief Justice invited the Prime Minister to begin the process to replace Brown as soon as possible.
One complaint is one too many. It should never happen. But that's reality. It happens.
What do you think? Was this a setup by Liberal insiders to remove an outspoken Conservative Supreme Court justice who was fighting for the fair trial rights of all Canadians? Be sure to check out our partner organizations, Innocence Canada and the Lighthouse Project, and check out the video on Bill C-40, also known as David Milgaard's Law, on wrongful convictions, which is being reviewed in Parliament. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and ring the notification bell to stay informed when new False Allegations Canada content is posted.